Mom.
Hi, everyone.
Guys, this is so weird. Literally, my mom's right there.
I've heard a lot about you, Mom. We'll be having drinks later. Hello, and welcome to tonight's Commonwealth Club World Affairs program. My name is Griffin Gaffney. I'm the CEO and co-founder of the San Francisco Standard. It's my pleasure to introduce to you tonight's guest, Nellie Bowles. Nellie is a writer for The Free Press, a new media company that she founded with her wife. If you aren't subscribed, I highly recommend her weekly TGIF column. I might add that I believe The Free Press is one of the most widely subscribed to publications built on Substack, which is a monumental achievement, given how young the publication is, so congratulations. Prior to that, she is an award-winning journalist. She spent 4 years covering tech for the New York Times, and I think you also had a brief stint here.
I did indeed. I started at the Chronicle.
At the Chronicle. I won't say much more about that.
I started at the best paper in America, the San Francisco Chronicle. But also, guys, you should read Griff's new publication, the San Francisco Standard, which is an amazing new publication covering San Francisco, tech, all of it.
Thank you.
From a smart perspective.
Thank you. Well, we have a lot of shared ground to cover, certainly. And we are delighted to welcome you back here to talk about your new book, Morning After the Revolution, Dispatches from the Wrong Side of History. So in preparation tonight, I've seen that you've been quite busy. I've been watching your interviews, Bill Maher, Fox News, MSNBC. My favorite is you in your backyard with Barry, with what I have to say as someone who loves to garden, a beautiful looking bougainvillea behind you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I will say, I'm not planning to be quite as feisty tonight, but we're certainly thrilled to welcome you back here to San Francisco. And I wanted to just start by asking you, what has life been like since the book launched?
It's such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
And life since the book launched has been very exciting, very fun. I don't know. I'm super pregnant, so I'm like really tired.
8 months, I think. Yeah.
I'm like really obscenely pregnant to be doing this. It's like not right. And so I have been a little tired, but it's been really good. I mean, like I had never done the TV stuff, so that was good to try. And then the reception has been kind of wild at times, but also really positive. I've gotten a lot of really nice notes from people who are implicated in any of the different chapters, because each chapter is sort of reporting, and so it's different scenes of cities and places and groups. And I've gotten nice notes from people who felt touched by it or seen by that.
One of the things we were just talking about in the green room was that in some of the televised interviews you've done, you said you've been a little surprised that your co-panelists in these discussions weren't surprised. They weren't really coming at you. They kind of were nodding in agreement like, yeah, we know.
Well, it was very fun being on MSNBC because you would think that might be a combative interview. But it wasn't. It was actually like Al Sharpton was selling my book for me. It was surreal.
Yeah.
And he was like, this is why we need this, and like, this is why this is so important right now. And I was just like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And I think what's happened is it took me 4 years to write the book over, I kind of was chipping away at the reporting, chipping away at the writing. While we were also building a company. And I think that in those 4 years, we've seen the arc of this movement. And so now we're at a point where actually a lot of this stuff in the book is seen by a lot of people, or a lot of the sort of semi-arguments made through anecdotes is seen by people as often common sense, which, and 3 years ago or 2 years ago, it was not seen as that. It was seen as more shocking. Whereas now, I think people are at the stage where they're pretending they never said abolish the police. Right?
Yeah.
Like they just never said that. And everyone's like, you're totally right. We're all on the same page. And I'm like, were we always? Yeah. And I think that's been really interesting and kind of cool, but also then like the dig at the book, not to focus on critics, but the dig at the book has been, well, some of these arguments we already knew, or we already knew this was silly. We already knew these things were funny. And I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily true.
Yeah.
I think now people are all kind of rushing to pretend so.
Where do you think that comes from?
I think think we've seen a lot of these policies play out. So the book, the book is a book of a little bit my journey and a little bit, mostly it's reported scenes from around the country over the last 4 years. And it's scenes like the Abolish the Police movement. It's scenes like there's a long chapter about San Francisco and about the streets of San Francisco, which I know we're going to talk about. But I think basically what's happening now comes from people looking and seeing with their eyes and seeing the reality versus the rhetoric of a lot of what's been said over the last few years. And they're seeing that maybe drug legalization doesn't work out as well as you might think it works. Like that's something that I used to be really for. And then you look at Oregon. Oregon's walking that back. Oregon's saying, actually, overdoses got out of control. And so I think just we've sort of seen things play out now.
Yeah. And we'll use that as a launching point to get to where we are tonight in San Francisco. There is a chapter called The Failure of San Francisco, which probably is not, well, the contents of that chapter are probably not news to anyone in this room tonight. But it kind of ends with what I'm reading between the lines as a glimmer of hope from you. And also, I think gets to this point of people have seen these policies play out. We saw the school board recall, the recall of Chesa Boudin, the district attorney. There were some elections in March, for those who pay attention to really small local elections on the DCCC in San Francisco, that indicated a shift in the electorate. How do you square that with the actual people in this city, how they feel about some of these issues, not just the commentators, your audience? What do you think is happening in the electorate?
I think, to me, in part because I grew up here, but in part because I really believe that San Francisco is such an important story and is such an important story to understand America, but understand a lot of these policies and a lot of the funniness and the absurdity and the complexity, because San Francisco has everything. It has all the money. It has all the smarts. The smartest people, like an enormous concentration of PhDs in the city. And it has all the beauty. Like, it's a beautiful city. It has everything. And so when things fall apart or when things get screwed up, there's no one, you can't point a finger and blame it anything but at ourselves, at sort of liberal policies or progressive policies. And you have to say, why? Why is this not working? And so it's a really rich city to write about because there's not anything outside of kind of our community to blame. And I think that, let's say Chesa Boudin, people were very excited about his election. I was really excited when that happened. I kind of believed in the reform movement, but then in each of these situations, you have someone then take it to such an extreme that it becomes irrational. So like, everyone wants police reform, everyone wants this and that, but Chesa was saying things like drug dealers shouldn't be prosecuted because they're victims too, or they're supporting a family in Honduras. Like, he really said this. And it's true. They are probably victims too in a million ways, and they are probably supporting a family in Honduras. But also, you have to arrest drug dealers. Like, that's just, it doesn't work to not. And I think that, the school board, we all saw that play out. It was very fun also because it was all on Zoom. So you could really see, like, you didn't even have to go to school board meetings anymore. The whole city was participating in school board meeting watching.
In our case, it was great because we could just clip it and then put it online.
No, I know. Like, everyone was like galvanized into seeing all of a sudden really the fringy, wackiest things that were going on. And why I feel a lot of hope about San Francisco is because you saw the fringiest, wackiest stuff going on for sure. And then you saw a huge groundswell of normal San Franciscans, of like people who just want good schools and relatively safe-ish streets. You saw them say, this is enough. And you saw them do 2 recalls. And the origin of the recalls especially was so cool because it started with Asian families who hadn't been super political beforehand. And they heard on one of these school board panels, they heard the school board saying basically that the Asian parents who want to keep Lowell SATs and all of this, or the test to get into Lowell, that these guys are white supremacists. And the school board was saying these things, like really toxic things about these parents. And the Chinese American community of San Francisco got really pissed off. And so a lot of the revolution was driven by them, which was so cool to watch. Anyway, so why I feel inspired about the city or optimistic is because I think that once people get aware of a lot of the sort of fringe funniness, they don't want that. They don't like that. And once they stop being scared of being bullied about it, they say enough. And if even San Francisco could do it, then every sort of like liberalism can make a comeback against whatever we want to call the movement to the left of it.
Do you think, I mean, you've articulated some of the ways in which San Francisco is incredibly different from other cities you spent time in reporting this, Seattle, Los Angeles, Portland. Sometimes I wonder, is it all that different? I mean, especially on the West Coast, you travel up and down, it kind of feels the same. Some of the fundamentals about the economy, the type of people who are here, the institutions we have are quite different. Is it that exceptional here? Is it a problem across the United States?
I think a lot of the issues San Francisco's been grappling with are ones that every city in the American West has been grappling with. You see it in LA, you see it in Portland. Each is different, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a universal sort of American West story, a lot of that movement.
Yeah. So getting back to, I mean, you said it in the book, you said it tonight, you even kind of were on inside of this movement, before you were covering it, you kind of believed in getting rid of some of these drug policies that some of these politicians stand for. Can you walk us through that transition from inside to outside and now being one of the main critics of it?
Yeah.
What has that journey been like?
Yeah, I was a very sort of happy reporter flowing in my normal flow of life from the local paper to, I made it to the New York Times as a features reporter there. And as 2020, 2021 started to get really hot, there were stories that were the most interesting stories that I was basically being told you can't cover and you can't pitch.
Specifically from editors.
Specifically kind of...
But I think in the book you also kind of articulate the whole culture of, culture of you shouldn't even bring that pitch forward.
Yeah, I would say at the Times it's not the top editors. And the top editors actually didn't like the movement so much. The top editors were pretty good to me. And they sort of wanted to try to keep things more journalistic. But there was a movement from the ground up, really, not top down. There was a movement from the ground up to say journalism should be more beautiful. Journalism should be about justice and about improving the world and about specifically helping elect democratic leaders in these, specific topics and helping specific politicians. It should be more practical. And it's not helpful to cover a lot of the most interesting things that were happening in 2020, 2021, and now. And so you had, not just at the Times, but all across sort of mainstream, especially East Coast media institutions, you had a closing of the journalist's mind. You had NPR coming out and saying, we're not going to cover Hunter Biden's laptop. That's just not a story. They came out and said that proudly, that we're not covering that. And that's a really crazy thing to say. Like, you can say it's not important or it's a this or this, but to say we're just not going to cover it at all is pretty wild. And that was happening more and more. So basically, I was trying to do features and have fun. And I wanted to go up to Chaz, which was the autonomous zone in Seattle, where a bunch of Antifa had taken over a gay neighborhood. And I was like, that's got my name on it. Like, I got to get there.
You're there.
And basically there was a groundswell within the newspaper that said anyone who was trying to do stuff like that was going to get in big trouble. And it got kooky. I mean, it got really weird. I ended up managing to do that story. When I came back, I had colleagues tweeting out that I was like I know it's all dumb because it's all on Twitter, but at the time it felt very meaningful to me.
It's okay.
But tweeting out that I was like a fascist and that this was, crazy, crazy stuff. And I realized, oh my God, there's a movement happening and I'm not able to join it. Like I just, my personality, I just couldn't do it. And so I ended up quitting. And for a little while, I didn't know what to do. And then my wife and I started this Substack. Really, I set up the blog, but she was the main writer of it. And then once I saw that it was starting to get successful, then I joined in writing. But I waited 6 months.
It's okay to do that. every
like all good
relationship has-
entrepreneurs.
Yeah, exactly.
I waited until I saw it was successful. And then I was like, okay,
Now I'm ready. Yeah. Hand me my readers, everyone.
I can do this.
Yeah. And so, and you spend quite a bit of time chronicling what I think is an incredible amount of work that you put into reporting this. You spent time in Seattle. You spent time on these Zooms with these anti-racist or challenging white supremacy, I think was one of the groups that we read about in the book. That was all happening after you left the Times. Yeah. And so how long did that take you? You just jump on a plane one day, you just decided, I'm out of the Times and I'm just gonna go, I'm gonna do this.
I basically only had one skill set that I'd been doing since I was 22 at the Chronicle, and it was just features reporting, and it was just getting on planes and going places and seeing things and writing about it. That was it. I'm very bad at anything else. Like, I got fired from my first job. That was at UCSF I was a study coordinator on like a science thing, and it was a disaster.
You don't give coordinator vibes.
I don't. I was bad. I messed up every database I touched. And so when I left the Times, I just figured I'll keep doing the stories I couldn't do there, or that kind of struck me as interesting. And I got this book deal pretty soon after I left, and I was sort of like, let me just go do a bunch of features, a bunch of like essays, funny essays.
So what we are reading here was not, you didn't know that this is where it would take you quite yet.
No.
You just jumped in.
I was like, guys, I know how to do these features. Let me just go and do them. Like, and can I expense it to you, Penguin Random House? And they were like, okay, fine. No, but, and so I went to a bunch of places. I went to George Floyd Square in Minneapolis. I spent time in Seattle. I spent time in Portland. I spent time at various sort of large-scale homeless encampments that we saw that were, my favorite one was this one in Echo Park in LA, which was like a gentrifying neighborhood of LA, where a group of socialist activists had taken over a park and turned it into kind of a revolutionary space where it was a mix of like fentanyl addicts and actual homeless people who have mental illness, and then all of these DSA members who...
And the one ringleader who we read about in the book that comes in his BMW every day.
My obsession became Jed. Yeah. And Jed would show up in his Beamer.
Yeah.
And join in the encampment.
Not a cheap one, by the way. Yeah.
No, and I just became obsessed with this encampment. And it became kind of fetishized by everyone as like a very important symbol of revolution, and it was left open for a long time. A young woman overdosed in a tent and was found dead in that tent like several days later, and everything had been hidden around her to hide what might have happened to her. There was a person found floating in the middle of the lake in Echo Park Lake. I mean, it was a really interesting scene. And the only coverage of it had really been this like strange fetishization of it from often East Coast media who would write about any attempts to close it or to clear it or to clean it up as like fascist police doing a bad thing. Anyways, so the book is all of these different scenes of reporting. And it took a while.
Yeah. I think it's, we'll get to this in a minute, but some of the current critics of the book sort of claim that you didn't do the work. And it struck me as the exact opposite. I was like, I cannot imagine being in that encampment, doing that level of reporting, or in Seattle, or all these different vignettes you take us through. It's a serious amount of work, even though you may not present it.
But it's fun. It's fun to report. Like, it's the best job in the world.
Yeah. Well,
it's the best, it's the most amazing job in the world to be able to go to places and talk to people and have that be a job.
Totally.
Like, I feel so lucky to be able to do it.
Totally.
And, yeah.
Although towards the end, it sounds like some of these people started catching on to you and like noticing and then trying to get you out. So I'm sure that was challenging. One of the things that I thought was really interesting about the book is you don't employ the term woke. You have a new term, new progressive. Where did that come from? Why? I'm assuming that was a very active choice on your part, given how hot of a topic that is right now.
I didn't use the word woke and don't like the term woke in the sort of modern debate, because when woke first was being rolled out, I really liked it. And I really like a lot of the principles of it, of the idea of being aware of how race plays into situations, or being aware of privilege. And like those are good concepts. And so I think now there's a sort of a movement to say, oh, woke is bad and anti-woke and all this. And it's a little bit like lazy to me. I think that it's tricky because the movement that we're talking about, like the movement that was the school board in Chesa, what was that? How do we define that? How do we label that? Like the movement that thinks London Breed is right wing. How do we articulate that? And it has always resisted a name. And so it's really hard as a writer to like figure out what to call it. And so people just rely on woke because that seems like it works well enough.
Yeah.
But I like new progressive because I thought it's really so much of the battle described in the book, and so much of the battle in San Francisco it's between liberals and a sort of new model of progressivism. And so it's not left or right. It's not any of the old fissures. It's kind of a new friction that's playing out. So yeah, I avoided the term woke.
Yeah. I mean, I think you would have had a much harder time had you heavily in the book.
I just breathed really heavily into the mic.
It's okay. But if there is a doctor in the house now. So you're kind of, I mean, again, throughout the book, in this conversation, you seem to show, I think, much more sympathy, really, for where these arguments come from. Where do you draw the line? Where do you see it sort of becoming unproductive, tilting into this new progressive or woke or whatever you want to call it, being not what it was intended to be?
I think when it becomes blind to reality and when it refuses to compromise, it becomes, first of all, it becomes funnier. Like it becomes really absurdist almost.
Yeah.
But like, I think, I mean, to give the kind of the quick actual description, it's like, okay, a liberal would believe that we should have police reform, that we should maybe even pay cops more so that it attracts a better type of person, spend more on police training, like would see the problem of police being bad sometimes and would say, let's improve that. And then the new progressive would say, the structure of policing is itself violent and impossible to reform, and it needs to be thrown out. And it needs to be either seriously defunded or completely abolished, and that's the only answer. And so that's kind of, that plays out in like time and again. So like if you look at something like inequity in public schools, like to bring it back to San Francisco, 8th grade algebra, instead of saying, let's try to make math education a lot better, let's put a lot more money into it, or let's figure out ways to work with our schools to make more kids capable at math. The new progressive would say, let's stop measuring it.
Or just get rid of it.
Yeah, well, because the thing that's upsetting about 8th grade algebra is that it sort of was a screening test at 7th grade, and people were like, that's not fair to measure it then. And it's like, because that then creates difference. And it's instead of trying to fix the inequity in education, it's just trying to sort of paper it over and say, like, if we don't have 8th grade algebra, then maybe the difference disappears. And
well, I guess theoretically, if you can't see it anymore,
I mean, yeah.
it is gone.
Yeah. And we all know how that played out. Like, we all know how 8th grade algebra played out. It plays out where kids from wealthy families go to private schools that teach it, or kids were starting to, parents were paying for private tutors and things like that for their kids. They were basically taking 8th grade algebra. I mean, basically all these other ways that people with means can skirt around this thing. but yeah, that's the difference between the liberal and the new progressive, I would say. And it's funny to some extent. I mean, it's some of this stuff goes into, like, let's say the most hot button topic of the day, the issue of like pediatric gender transitions. The liberal would say something to the effect of like, we should work on making national laws that make it so that discrimination against trans people is illegal, which it's really not in a lot of places. We should make it like do this and that. Whereas the new progressive took the most extremist stance that to me was not helpful to the broader, as a gay person, not helpful to the broader cause of the LGBTQ+++. And it was the stance of like toddlers know their gender. Like prepubescent children can make decisions that last a lifetime because they know who they are. And
we'll find out with your soon-to-be second toddler. Yeah. And how did that become, I guess the challenge and the reason you need 200+ pages to articulate it is, how did that get legs in the world? The new progressive movement, how did it become something that, in my view, is probably discussed in dark corners of Twitter into something that's influencing policing strategy and funding of police and nonprofit organizations and policies and how did that happen?
How did it win?
Yeah, how did it win and how did it do it quickly?
I think it won for two reasons. I think one is that it notices a very true issue or a very true problem. Like George Floyd was murdered on camera. That's a very true thing that happened. And so the response, like it's not making up tragedy or making up problems in the world. Like even the 1619 Project. There's truth that 1619 was part of our original American story. Now the 1619 Project then went and said that 1619 is our true founding, that's the actual founding. So it takes it to the extreme. But the reason it resonates is because there is truth and there has been erasure. And then the other reason I think it won so fully is because of the new tools that are available to a social movement. So Twitter and the role of social media and the quickness with which movements can grow and like take over a conversation. We'd never lived through before. The quickness with which a small group of people can become a very loud, bullying mob feeling.
Yeah, cancel culture.
Yeah, that we didn't have like, we weren't used to that at first. And so small groups of activists could say, if you're going to question the pediatric transition doctrine that we're presenting, we're going to call you transphobic. And guess what? 100 of us are going to call you transphobic. And then you go online, you go on Facebook, you go on Twitter, and 100 people are calling you something that's really mean. And so I think that worked very well to kind of scare people into conformity with something that was like more radical than they actually felt. And that was like a little bit, and now I think there's a little bit more of an immune response to that, where it's like, okay, if a group of activists are yelling at me, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, it's gonna be fine. Like I remember reading something about how the Democratic Party didn't believe in Twitter as a place to spread their message to the American people, but they believed in Twitter as a place to do message discipline among journalists and things. So you can kind of use it as a place and stoke outrage to keep journalists, to keep writers, to keep public intellectuals in line with whatever the message of the day is. And so it was used that way. But now I think it's becoming less effective. I think people are becoming a little less scared of that. But I think that's why it won. Because partly it was true and seeing a true problem, and partly because there were new tools.
Yeah. And sort of, in my view of, especially this challenging white supremacy workshop that you described going to, like it sort of became professionalized as well. You could sign up and pay for a training and attend it, or have them come to your office or whatever in order to sort of pay into and become part of this movement.
Well, part of the genius of what the movement did also is, and there's like 2 chapters on this basically. So the anti-racism of like 1990s Berkeley was really hard. It was really hard work. It was a lot of like trying to get legislation changed. Thank you. It was a lot of like trying to get legislation changed. It was working in campaigns to help causes for the third world. It was hard work. And a group of very clever anti-racist educators, almost all of them white women, came up with a new concept of it. And it's 2 chapters in the book about it. It's basically a therapeutic model of anti-racism. So it became about working on yourself. Instead of making the world better, instead of worrying about why more kids aren't good at math, it became about saying, why do you care so much about math? And there was a woman who came out with a list called The Characteristics of White Supremacy, the Traits of White Supremacy. And they included things like individualism, right to comfort, objectivity, sense of urgency.
Punctuality.
Yeah. And this is a white woman who came out with this list. And this list, which to me reads as like shockingly racist, was embraced as a new progressive mantra. It was so embraced that the Smithsonian Museum made a beautiful poster of the list of white supremacy traits that included individualism. Like that's a crazy idea that that's a white trait. But anyways, so then the fallout from that list and from the embrace of that mentality was that the work of anti-racism and improving society was about excavating your urgency, excavating your perfectionism. And it turns out that the people who love doing that are a bunch of white women. That we love to feel bad about our perfectionism. And so it became this whole kind of ecosystem for years. You had Robin DiAngelo as the most famous example of this. You had this whole ecosystem of the new anti-racism that didn't involve anything practical in the world. And actually, if you tried to talk about the practical stuff, you were called racist for doing that because you're imposing your idea of how things should be. If you try to say we need to, one of the anti-racist educators' favorite lines is to say, we don't want to expand the boardroom table, we want to dismantle the boardroom altogether. So it's like none of the lean in Sheryl Sandberg type activism. It's not about improving Coca-Cola. It's about trying to dismantle Coca-Cola, whatever that means, which really in practice means basically nothing. So yeah, that's another reason why I won, actually, is because it became really kind of fun and easy to do a lot of this activism. It became sort of like almost silly.
Well, my impression, too, from that workshop specifically, I'm not going to go in and read the whole passage, but my interpretation, especially of the first few pages of you describing being in that workshop, is that it's sort of, I read it as religious. The sort of, you describe kind of like convulsing and crying, and I could not read that as this transforming into something much larger than just a workshop.
Yeah.
Did you see that in other, like in Echo Park and all these other groups that...
Yeah,
blind idolatry, I guess is what I would describe it as.
Other people have made this point really well. There's like, I think John McWhorter has said this a lot, but this idea of without organized religion, there's a hole in humans that want that and need that. And with falling Christianity, falling basically religious attendance, that some of this stuff has come in to replace it. And that some of it, it's okay if it's irrational because a leap of faith is sometimes necessary. And humans have a religious impulse that says a leap of faith is sometimes necessary. But yeah, the trainings I went to, and just write about in the book.
These were over Zoom, right?
The main one I went to was because it was the heat of the pandemic.
Yeah. Which is, I bring it up because it's even more shocking to me that anyone could have any meaningful experience over Zoom.
No.
Frankly.
But you can. If you're in it for 6 days, you get in.
I guess you're just so numb to the world.
You get deep.
Yeah, you're like, I am going to start crying.
You feel, you feel kind of captured within it. And there was a lot of physical stuff. Like, it was like, everyone sits and takes off their shoes and then taps the bottom of their feet rhythmically together, and then you tap your chest. You're supposed to like activate your skin, and then Robin DiAngelo like comes on screen, and you're like, it's very religious, and emotional and physical, and I felt very touched, like very activated by it. Like, I cried. It was hard not to. You really, and then you had these sort of mesmerizing white women on screen speaking to you about how to unleash yourself from your internal whiteness. And I don't know, it was...
You're still white. So,
Well,
so it didn't work, I guess.
No, guys, it got to like crazy places though. I mean, because they would basically argue. I mean, there was one woman in one of the classes who was in an interracial marriage, and she was talking about how she's scared about like how she's going to hurt her son, and the moderator was like, "You should be," and that's dangerous. And it was like, holy, this is where we are, and it got really weird. It got really weird.
Do you think that
the Robin DiAngelo chapter is really weird? It's like a psychological situation.
I was reading it on a plane. I was kind of like, whoa.
No. But what's funny is like, I don't know, I fact checked the book and I sent her all of her segments, and I sent everyone their portion of the book. Like, in journalism, you sometimes sort of do that and you sometimes don't, like for fact checking. And for the book, I figured, it's gonna be in a book. Let them read the whole thing.
Yeah.
And they were really proud of it. They liked I don't know if they liked the representation, but they were like, this is fair.
It's accurate.
And they wanted like a tiny tweak or a tiny, they were like.
She cried more than that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it was really interesting.
So do you think that these leaders know what they're doing in that sense? That they're transcending just bullet points of a workshop?
Yeah, I think they see themselves on a spiritual quest. I think for this portion of the book, for the kind of white lady anti-racist leaders who emerged, Robin being the most famous, but there's a bunch of them. I think they see themselves as like spiritual guides for people.
Yeah.
And I think they've become spiritual guides for people also. Like, not just, I don't think that's a false perception that they have. I think for a lot of people for a few years, I think a little less now, but for a few years, these were American gurus.
I will start getting to some audience questions, but I do want to get to, we were talking about this backstage, that I feel is a little maybe lost in some of the harder critics speaking about your work or writing about your work now. Is I read most of your writing as like, you have these zingers that are just funny, and I thought so clearly sarcastic. And it seems to me that some of the critics are taking that in the exact way that you would expect them to, which is extremely seriously, and therefore you need to be canceled or whatever. And so I'm curious, like...
I can't be canceled anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
I got my own company now.
Yeah. That is true. Good. Do you think that it's like exactly what you expected some of these people to say?
I think one thing that's been lost in the last few years is a little bit of humor at some of this stuff, and
Totally.
just like at the human condition. Like, it's okay if not everything is the most serious moment. Not every political belief you have is the most serious thing in the world. Like, but yeah, I think people got mad that I made a little fun.
Yeah, I have a.
Are you gonna read? Are you gonna?
I have a
read
few.
Mean
I have a
Books?
few of my favorites. I was describing to my husband that even I was learning stuff about demisexual and asexual. I was like, I guess we're demisexual. I'm not really sure. But in describing,
There's a lot about the
we
new
do like
asexual.
each other most of the time. In describing sort of that splintering, I guess you might say, of the gay rights movement, you say all over the country, people are having less sex, fewer children, and fewer marriages. We're all asexuals now. But that's how I read it. We're all asexuals now. Humorous, funny, it's sarcastic, but I can imagine some of these critics reading you, we're all asexuals now. And it made me feel like how deep and again, on the airplane, I had this internal dialogue, like, which way did she mean it? But I know, I know you well enough.
Technically, I mean, you're banned from having sex.
Yeah, it's just, I think it's sort of case in point. The reason I'm bringing it up is the critics, the way you write, the reception to that writing, the lack of ability to grasp the humor proves the point.
Well, you said it better than I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think there are serious things in the world, but I think it's also okay to make a little fun and to have a little fun with some of the absurdities of the last few years.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I don't know. I honestly haven't, I know, what Griff's very politely, there were some bad reviews, guys.
Yeah.
And now, weirdly, there are good reviews. The Guardian gave me a good one.
It takes longer to write.
It was a cycle.
Yes.
But yeah, basically
you actually have to read it, by
that
the
the humor was too much, and that these are serious times, and that it's not appropriate to be funny.
Yeah.
And I just don't. I'm just fundamentally against that. I reject that.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay to have a little fun and to think that the guy with the BMW at the homeless encampment is funny, and it doesn't mean you hate homeless people.
Yeah.
Literally, they're writing that I hate homeless people, and it's like that's insane.
Right.
But whatever. I don't.
It is funny. I was laughing the whole time. And honestly, I just thought it was really solid writing. It was enjoyable. I emailed you as I was reading it, and the subject line was, wow. It just was fun. Yeah. Very fun.
He's a real journalist, I promise. He's not just like a friend. We're not just like local gays who hang out.
Yeah. Well, we've been canceled, so. Well, I'm not gay enough, That's serious. I have been told that.
No.
Yeah, for real. Doesn't count anymore is what I've been told, which I like to remind people. I grew up in a small town in Oregon. It really counted back then. It's like, let me tell you. Yeah. Anyway, not anymore.
Gay men are the Trumpers of our community.
So I'm told. Okay, so some audience questions. First up is new progressivism a uniquely American phenomenon? And this actually also, we were talking about one of the critics from The Guardian in the UK, who was one of the positive ones, was like, this is hilarious, both because Brits have a better sense of humor and I think because they're not here, but do we see this in other countries?
I think a lot of what we saw is, to me, uniquely American, because like the idea of like whittling away public services. So like one thing that to me is really American, let's say, about the police reform movement was one of the responses was the violence interrupter programs. And the violence interrupter programs sound kind of nice. And the idea is that guys from a community will be sort of tasked and paid to go out and get in violent situation, get involved with if there's a violent situation about to transpire and to try to de-escalate. And they're trained in de-escalation and sent out and told to do that all day, day after day. And that's being presented as like the alternative to policing. These guys have no pensions. They have no body armor.
Mm-hmm. No training often.
They have very little training. They are not obviously armed. Mm-hmm. They have no body cameras. And they report enormous amounts more violence done unto them than the average cop. Mm-hmm. Enormous amounts more of them survive shootings, are shot at. Like it, and so to me, it's a very American response to say, it's almost like a libertarian response a little bit, to say like, instead of our unionized, pensioned, trained, imperfect cops, we're gonna do this sort of like Wild West version.
Yeah.
Like, we're gonna do this version where there's none of that. They don't get a union. They just go into the violent stuff and they're just gonna be better because they're locals. Yeah. And it's just a little, like, I don't think that you don't see a similar attitude in Europe, let's say, around that. You don't see a kind of like, same with homelessness and drugs. A lot of places, drugs, everyone points to Portugal. It's like a country where you don't get put in prison for doing drugs, but you can't set up a tent city.
Right.
and refuse treatment. You get offered treatment, and then you have to go and get treatment, and you have to go and do things. But like it's not the sort of libertarian free-for-all that actually happens in America that I do think is really American.
Yeah. It's a uniquely American thing to just kind of look away.
Yeah, and to advocate that like any intervention from the state is violence in a way. Mm-hmm. And to me, that seems like the normal normal liberal response is like, you want the state to be involved and well-funded and like well-trained, like in terms of policing or in terms of helping drug addicts. Like, I don't think that it's like a normal liberal response to walk past someone dying on the sidewalk and to think that that's like the zenith of progressivism. That's crazy.
Right.
Like that's not, and that wouldn't really happen in other, like in like a socialist utopia, like I imagine is Sweden or something.
Yeah. Well, you'd sort of address this in the San Francisco chapter as well, because we have such a large city budget. It's ballooned over the last decade. And I think some in America would say, well, the solution to that is, well, we just need more money.
And I think it's really hard for folks to acknowledge that it's just a bad idea, actually. And that it's not that more money is needed. It's that a different approach is needed. Mm-hmm. And it's not that we should fund the violence interrupters more. It's that doesn't work. And that I write about that they're getting shot and they're getting killed right away.
Right.
And I think it's really hard for people to admit that the fundamental idea is bad. It's not just the execution.
Right. So shifting gears, another audience question. Thoughts on NPR and other public media perspectives?
That's a deep cut free presser there.
Yeah.
NPR, I think, we recently published an NPR whistleblower who is basically a longtime editor there who put out an essay about his experience at NPR, saying a lot of similar stuff that a lot of people have said now about the New York Times, about all of mainstream American media, which is that any voices outside of this little faction have been suppressed. And thoughts on NPR, I think in response to that essay we published, they announced a new editing layer that's going into effect immediately. Mm-hmm. That's called the backstop or something. Mm-hmm. And I think that there is a scramble internally to reform now, and that's pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of cool.
Do these whistleblowers just reach out to you now that the Free Press is kind of known for this?
Yeah.
They just drop in your inbox?
Yeah.
That's good for you. That's great.
It's the craziest thing.
Yeah.
No, yeah, they just show up. It's not all media whistleblowers. It's also like
all types.
Yeah, it's all types. Mm-hmm. Whistleblowers are special.
But even in the journal, like the operation and how you set principles around the ethics of journalism, even there are some news institutions that wouldn't even entertain those types of pitches or anonymous whistleblowers or whatever, because they may have policies against, well, we don't publish anonymously, we don't publish work with anonymous sources, or I think what's so remarkable about, or not remarkable, there are these little ways in which how you operate your newsroom, these small rules can have a massive impact on what you end up publishing, that it's totally unseen to the rest of the world. Yeah. Because it's just happening day to day. You can see it in the product, but you don't realize that it's just one tiny rule change.
I think what we're trying to do at the Free Press is to be in the new world of new media, right? Like
what does that mean to you, the new world?
It means being unstuck from the boring political binary of the old. Like that there's a big world between NPR and the Daily Wire.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of folks in the middle who think, NPR is kind of fun, but sometimes, and I like this and that, but it's a little ideological, and who think, Daily Wire, I'm not interested in that. It's too rageful, or it's too politicized, and who are in the middle there. And that's not being served by traditional media. It's not being served by our mainstream institutions that kind of see Americans as these simplistic political binaries. Mm-hmm. So I think the new world is saying there's a market in the middle, and then there turns out there is.
Yeah.
But we try to sort of we want to kind of bring the values and the quality of the old world, though, because the trouble is, in the Wild West of the new media, you know this, like
There's some total crap.
yeah, there's crap,
Yeah.
and there's schemers and scammers and people who are being paid by sources you don't know about. Like, there's not the same sort of world of ethics that the old media has tried to cultivate over the years, and so we're trying to bring that in while staying in the free-form world.
It's tough.
Yeah, it's a like delicate balance. And the thing is, I kind of thought for a while, I was really nervous about, like, as the business was growing and we were hiring people, I was like, our whole business could shut down if the mainstream world becomes a little less crazy, right? Like, just a little less.
Yeah.
Not even that much.
Yeah.
And it just hasn't happened.
Yeah.
So we kind of have this, like, this is like the beauty of America, capitalism. Like, where there's a hole in the market, things will rise to fill it. So that's what we've been doing.
As I said at the top of the chat, quite successfully so. Back to the new progressivism movement. Do you have the opinion that the root of the problem, this is an audience question, is due to a lack of critical thinking or a lack of teaching of critical thinking? Where does it really, if you go way back, where does it start? Yeah, maybe it's a simple answer.
Comfort with debate. Comfort with, like I think, comfort with things being complicated isn't really taught in our system. I'm not an expert on our education system, so I don't, but I think, people, my sense of the kids on campus these days is that, like many generations of young people, they're very sure of their politics. Like, I was very sure of my politics. And I think teaching a little more, like, humility and comfort with complexity is lacking.
Yeah, some claps for that.
It's so cheesy, guys. It's so cheesy.
Why has radicalism on both the left and the right surged in the past 2 decades? But perhaps a similar root cause.
Yeah, I mean, this book is about my world, right? This book is about liberalism versus progressivism. It's about the sort of, like, American cities that are all very liberal, right? This is about that movement. But there's a mirror movement in many ways happening on the right, a mirror sort of purity politics, a mirror kind of canceling of people who, they call them rhinos, Republicans in name only.
Yeah.
There's kind of a Trump purification movement within the right that you see. A lot of any kind of dissident figure is pushed out. I mean, Trump's famous for this at this point. His Twitter feed now is Truth Social. It's like a constant purification ritual of canceling any relatively sane Republican. So yeah, I think it's happening on both sides in really different ways and in different venues. Like, it's not how elite education institutions aren't being racked by that kind of purification process that's happening there. I should have a better word than that, whatever you want to call the Trumpification process.
Yeah. It's winnowing out the non-believer.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it is social media for both, and the power of that to organize a group to oust a bad offender or a dissident.
And to only hear your people.
Exactly.
You can literally mute everyone else.
Exactly.
Which is the opposite of critical thinking. Maybe a few more questions on free press media. Marianne Williams, again, audience question. Marianne Williamson talks about the political media establishment as antithetical to democracy. Do you agree? And where does the free press fit in?
Ooh.
Are you establishment? When do you become establishment? How many subscribers does it take to be
a lot more.
Yeah.
Marianne Williamson, she is such a great character. She came on the podcast. She's an amazing political character. When what was it? Is the mainstream institutions, are they the end of democracy? I don't know. We're sort of stuck with these two parties, and we have mainstream media that just represents each party. I think mostly partisan media is just really boring, and like people don't like reading propaganda. So I don't think it's the end of democracy because we have two parties, so it kind of makes sense that we'd have like two sides of media.
Yeah.
But like, I think it's the end of like good American writing and good American journalism if people are just out to be propagandistic for their various party.
Right.
I mean, you see this in San Francisco, let's say, with the tech world. Tech leaders are always saying things like, the media's against us, we need to start our own media company, right? And so they'll start ones that are non-journalistic that are like, I think Andreessen Horowitz tried to do this with The Future, The Future, and it basically internal media companies within a venture capital firm that is going to finally tell the truth about tech products.
Right.
And people don't really like reading it.
Because
it's boring.
Yeah.
It's propaganda.
They know it.
Yeah. They'll hire a journalist from the old world and they'll put them there and they'll say, write some propaganda about our new company we just invested in.
Yeah.
I don't think that's like, says anything broadly about like the tech world or something, but you're just not going to get really great journalism in that situation. So I think if you have all of our mainstream media institutions on the left and the right just beholden to a political candidate and just obsessed with like pleasing a political faction, it's just going to be really boring as a consumer.
Yeah. Well, speaking of boring as a consumer, there's another related question is...
as a writer.
Yeah, totally. Do you think there's a point where, and I take issue with this one because I can tell you the people in this room do not read this type of article. Do you think there is a point where news will go back to reporting the facts? And yes, there should be facts, but I think that there's sort of this like idolatry of a time when the newspaper was just like bullet points of facts, and excellent news outlets were never that. They were built on incredible writing and storytelling, which were supported by facts, but weren't what I think people are grasping for this, well, just give me the plot sheet of what happened. And I don't think that's the answer either, is it?
I think when people say that they want the news to report facts, what they're trying to say is they want reporters to be open-minded and curious and to not be given stuff that's been like pre-chewed by ideology, where all of the messiness of a scene has been kind of like shorn of it. So you just get the message that the reporter wanted to send. And I think that it's fair to say you're missing that. It's not that no one actually wants like a digest of here are the facts of the day. Here's where the market is today. Here's where it's that there's nostalgia for a time when things were more open-minded to see the messy reality.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of messy realities, I'm going to take you home on our last question, which is about your future family member. How have your feelings around motherhood changed throughout your journey?
Motherhood. How have my feelings on motherhood changed? Well, I think one thing that I do in the book is go from being very sure of myself to basically less sure of myself, and just the maturation process that happens from 30 to 36. And I mean, there's nothing that makes you question all of the things you know or feel more unsure than having a child. And our daughter, and God willing, this little boy, I don't know, all the parents here know, it's like opening a chaos window and you just have no idea and you're just totally humbled by it. You have no idea who's going to meet you. And like humility is the thing you have to have going into it, or you pick up really quick.
Yeah. Yeah. Chaos is life. We will be fact-checking all of that with Mother later. Well, let's give a round of applause for Nellie. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much. Thank you, guys. I think fully half this room is my family members.
Yeah, I heard you have a lot of siblings, siblings and siblings.
I got cousins
Yeah.
here. I got.
Well, thank you for joining us. If you want to continue to support the Commonwealth Club's efforts in making virtual and in-person programming like this possible, you can go to commonwealthclub.org. I'm Griffin. Thank you for joining us and have a lovely evening.